Do you believe in the government? Do you have faith in its inalienable ability to tell you right from wrong, even when you are the wrong? We often talk about the government like it's a faith system, because it kind of is. Together we agree to its laws, elections and processes as an agreed upon way of managing our society. We believe in that social contract. But what happens if you don't believe in the government? Over the last few years, you've probably heard more about sovereign citizens. These are individuals who have essentially chosen to abandon or reject the social contract of the country they live in. In other words, they believe the government's laws, elections and processes do not apply to them. I had a few interactions with sovereign citizens during my time in the nation's capital, when a number of their members became involved, among other fringe groups, in what became known as the 2022 Canberra Convoy, an exotic offshoot of Canada's own Freedom Convoy. It's easy to make fun of these individuals and their interesting ideas, but many of them suffered a lot, personally and financially, during the COVID-19 pandemic. And in their confusion, they tried to figure out what was going on. Some of these people unfortunately fell into these conspiratorial rabbit holes, including the sovereign citizen movement, which is another fine export from the US of A. Now, the movement in Australia is largely based on a misunderstanding of the law. While messaging varies, the Rule of Law Education Centre says the movement at large shares a few beliefs. These include disputing the sovereignty of the Australian government, claiming laws only apply if individuals consent to them, like a contract, that the Magna Carta invalidates the Australian Constitution, and refusing to respond to a name and calling themselves a flesh and blood man, which somehow means they're not subject to legal authority. These are incorrect for a few reasons. First, under federal law, sovereignty, meaning the authority of the government, rests in the people. We're running the joint. And if we allow multiple sovereigns within one system, there's going to be disagreements about whose laws we follow, and it'll just get too complicated. Second, everyone physically in Australia is bound by its laws. Regardless of whether you know about, agree or disagree with the law, there is no way to excuse yourselves from the legal system. Third, while the Magna Carta, 1215 CE, played a huge role in forming common law, which we adopted from the English Empire, it does not have any authority over Australian laws. Fourth, I'm going to let you work that one out for yourselves. Now, sovereign citizens have been here for a while, but they've generally been considered by authorities to be harmless. Meet Leonard Castley, a farmer from WA who back in 1970 founded the legally unrecognised independent state of the Hutt River Province. Prince Leonard's 75 square kilometre property took on this responsibility after he had a tiff with the state government over wheat production quotas. After the media caught on to his newly founded, legally unrecognised independent state, the Hutt River Province became a tourist attraction replete with postage stamps, a currency, 10,000 non-resident citizens, and a treaty with Indigenous landowners. Unfortunately, in 2017, the Prince of the West and his son, Arthur, got caught doing a sneaky one on the tax office. Together, they were ordered to pay off a $3 million tax bill. When they appeared in court to refute the order, WA Supreme Court Justice Ren Lemuer said the royal family's arguments were bizarre, irrelevant, and gobbledygook. Now, this all sounds like fun and games, but due to the rising number of sovereign citizens, Australia's court systems are being pushed to their limits. Last year, the Federal and Family Court told Ariel Bogle, an investigative reporter from The Guardian, that while it did not collect data on the frequency of sovereign citizen involvement, anecdotal evidence points to an increase in recent years, especially following the COVID pandemic, and increased access to online resources. Ms Bogle heard from several family court and independent children's lawyers that fringe legal movements like sovereign citizens were online discussing the claim that children were property. Now, this can make legal matters around divorce and child custody quite tricky. Using these arguments, which have no legal basis, not only slows down the trial and uses up already strained court resources, it can also lead to kidnappings. Ms Bogle found several examples in recent years where a parent involved in a custody battle was convinced of these pseudo-legal arguments and had run away with their children. This is an example of the more extreme elements in the movement, which have been showing up more and more since the COVID-19 pandemic. In 2023, the Australian Federal Police told the public it was looking at sovereign citizen groups that they considered violent in nature. Then Acting Assistant Commissioner of Counterterrorism and Special Investigations, Stephen Demetto, said in a presentation on the movement that what we've learnt is whilst these groups present and behave very differently to other extremist groups, there is an underlying capacity to inspire violence. We are largely seeing these groups take action in the form of non-violent protest, including co-opting other demonstrations. However, there is also a propensity for fixation on high office holders and public figures, as well as some within the movement urging violence. Part of the AFP's fear was spurred on by the events of January 6 in the US. Another was from the Weambler attack in December 2022. This event saw Gareth Train, his wife Stacey and brother Nathan in an armed confrontation with Queensland police on their rural property, where over several hours they ended up killing 2 constables, a neighbour and themselves. While the trio had ties to the sovereign citizen movement, this event has come to be dubbed Australia's first fundamentalist Christian terrorist attack. Why? Well, it's part of the reason why targeting these kinds of extremists are so difficult for security agencies. They believe in a lot of different ideas, but usually don't have any established links to organised terror groups. This makes them hard to identify and prevent from being a risk to the public, as they're more likely to go out and commit their own solo acts of violence. The Australian Security Intelligence Organisation claims the pandemic accelerated the radicalisation of various conspiracy theorists, including members of the sovereign citizen movement. Academics have said this is generally due to a dangerous cocktail of too much social media, severe isolation, underlying issues with mental health, and an anger towards the authorities. It's an unfortunate truth that in our society today, it's so easy to be radicalised. Put under the right pressures and given some decent Wi-Fi, you can whip up anybody into a storm of fiery resistance to the powers that be. Sometimes the reasons are justified, but sometimes they're based on bullshit. What's important is that you're able to use your brain and work out fact from fiction through reliable sources. Easier said than done. But to start, it helps to understand that faith in the government is very important, because if you don't believe in the system that governs your society, why would you respect its laws? Why would you respect its institutions? Why would you accept its social contract?